This is episode 5 of the Facebook 5-3. We're going to get the cam bearings in, and we're going to get the main bearings and rod bearings assembled and check all the clearances. Stay tuned. So to start with on cam bearings, I know people ask all the time, which cam bearing do I need? There's really 3 part numbers. There's a CH10, there's a CH23, and there's a CH25. The 23 to me is, and that's deer bond part numbers. The 23 is just useless. Let's just forget about the 23. So the CH10s fit the Gen 3 blocks. The CH25s fit the Gen 4 blocks. The 23 is a Gen 4 diameter. The diameters and the widths are different. So let's see. So this set is 10s. These are 25s. And you can see the width difference. A 23 is this width, but this diameter. It was the first so some of the early blocks that would have been a Gen 3 block with long head bolts had this diameter cam bearing. And it would have come with a thin bearing like this, but this diameter. And that's like 04, pretty much you could see either way in 04. You could have the small diameter or the big diameter in 04. It was the changeover year. So we want this wide bearing, and even with this wide bearing, the bearing is still not as wide as the cam journal. So we never used the 23. Just because of that fact. We want this wide bearing to support the load. So and it's pretty much easy to tell just by the width if you look at your block, and if you know if you got a Gen 4 block, for sure it's gonna be this. I've never seen a Gen 4 with this diameter bearing. So this is obviously a Gen 4 block. It's aluminum, so it's going to take the 25, and we got our handy dandy tool, and we're going to start putting these things in, and I'm going to show you how they orient and why and all of that jazz. So in a lot of stuff is like this, but on a LS, number 1 and number 5 are the same diameter, and they're the largest. And then number 2 and 4 are the same size, and they're just slightly smaller. And then number 3 is all by itself, and it's even smaller than the rest. So, you know, why? I don't know the answer to that question. I can only assume that they bored from each end, bored this side, and then wanted it to progressively get smaller so the tool wouldn't drag. That's the only thing I can assume. And they're labeled, so each bearing gives you a part number, and a position that they go in. And that is super critical, and it's stamped on the back of the bearing, and it'll have the part number, and then you can see the position that goes in. So even though they should be in the box correctly, we always verify the location as we're putting them in to make sure that we don't have any discrepancies on that. So you got a pretty big window to line up in, and just as long as the oil hole is in that window right there, it's fine. So we start at the back and work our way to number 2, and then I go in from the back and do number 1 from the back. That way we got alignment. So we're going to put in number 5 first. And why in the world? They give you 2 oil holes. I have no idea of that either, but there's only 1 oil hole in the block. So just as long as we get one of them in it. Give it a little lubrication. And we line up the hole. And then we figure out what we're doing with the hammer. Yeah, we got a little ways to go. And I always just use a pick to make sure that we are in line with an oil hole. And then we'll do number 4. And so 4 will be a 2. And well, line up the oil holes. Now, looking straight down in here. So here, you can see my finger. There's a lifter bore right here, and I've seen some where the number 4 wasn't driven in far enough. It was still in line with the oil hole, but it was just hanging the lifter. So as the lifter traveled, it was rubbing the side of the bearing. So just be aware that you get number 4 in far enough to not be in the way of the lifter. And then same deal, we'll take our pick. Just make sure, yep, we got alignment. Three. Yeah, I mean, pretty much 4, 3, and 2 are really close to the lifter if you don't get it in. So all 3 of those can be a problem. Yep. Got alignment there. Yep. All right, and now we'll come in from the back, because as we going in, we have a cone that gives us alignment to keep everybody square. So when you get to the last one, you know, you're just hanging out here in the world. So we always spin around and come in from the back. That way we can put the alignment cone in the rear housing bore, and we know the number one will be straight with the block. It's a little more aggravating, but it's well worth it to make sure that everybody's like it's supposed to be. You just be gentle going back through. And a lot of people think that cam bearings are just, you know, super tender, but they're really thick babbitt, and they can take, I mean, some dings and nicks. I mean, we don't want to by no means, but some dings and nicks is not gonna affect really. All right. All right, so that's the cam bearing install. I mean, with the right, you know, we got an expandable tool, we got a fixed tool. The fixed tool's a little easier as far as not for a newbie not messing up the bearings. But I actually like the expanding tool better because it locks, and I can rotate the tool to rotate the bearing for oil hole alignment, whereas the fixed tool, it just spins. So I'm gonna end up cutting an O-ring groove in the fixed tool, and then it'll slide on the O-ring, and then it won't be loose. That way we can turn the tool for alignment. But that's the you know, the critical part is just straight and the oil hole be lined up, and get them in the right hole. And I mean, you could put them in the wrong hole, but it would either fall in or it would be extremely tight. So you're probably not gonna mess that up too much. We're gonna get the caps off and get the main bearings, and then we'll come back and we'll show you that whole process. We'll measure the crank and set up a dial bore gauge, and then we'll check the main bearing clearance, and we're gonna check the cam bearing clearance also. Stay tuned. All right, so we got all our bearings. This thing is 10. We ground the crank 10. The new King bearings do not have on the thrust. There is no locating tang. I've seen some questions about that in some of the forums. Just know that the new King bearings don't have a locator on the thrust. So we'll get all the bearings loaded in. We'll put some extreme pressure lube under the heads. It still had a fair amount on the threads, so it didn't need any there, but we used this CMD extreme pressure lube, and it's inexpensive and it works like a champ. And we just run them down just snug, and we'll break them all loose before we start the torque sequence. And we have a sheet on our website that shows all the torque specs for LS engines. So if you need to know torque specs, there's a link in the drop down column, and you can just print this sheet right out and have all the specs. So the first sequence on all the bolts is torque them to 15 foot-pounds. And then the outer bolts is 51 degrees. And then the inners are 80 degrees. And the nice thing about these digital wrenches, come over here and look at this. So it'll actually show you what it torqued to. So 81 degrees yielded 63.5 foot-pounds of torque. So when you do that, you can look at every one, and if you see one that went, you know, ever how many degrees, but the torque is way down, you know that bolt is done. It's reached its service limit. So we'll grab the crank and measure it up, and then we'll set a bore gauge, and then we're gonna measure these bearing clearances. All right, so we're gonna measure the crankshaft, and we got our bore gauge, and we're gonna get it set up. So and I've already took an average, but we'll just go with the front main. They're all within a tenth or two, and then we'll verify our bore gauge. There we go. So that's about 2 1/10. That's 2. That's 3. Always with King, the thrust is always big. Every time I've checked hundreds of sets. 2 1/10 or 2. And 2 1/10. So all the mains except the thrust are within a tenth. And like I say, we are all pretty much 2 thousandths clearance, and the thrust is 3 thousandths, and pretty much, like I say, every one I check is that way. And so this is dead on the specs we want to see, especially on a stock build. Even performance stuff, we run 2.5 on the mains. We run in 5W30 oil, so you just don't need a bunch of clearance for any reason. I mean, we got stuff making up in the mid-teen horsepower. I mean, 1400 horsepower with 2.5 thousandths clearance, and when they come in for freshening, the bearings look like brand new. So let me set up the bore gauge for the cam bearings, and then we're gonna check the cam bearings, and we'll see what they say. A lot of times the cam bearings are loose, and we put, you know, a set of 1s or 2s in the cam bearings to get that worked out, but maybe we'll get lucky on this one. So right here is a problem. That's 4.5 thousandths on the front cam bearing. And then if we can get back here. So the second cam bearing's only got 1.5 thousandths clearance. Let me check it up and down. Yeah, and up and down, vertical, get in there. Yeah, that's about 1 thousandths. So that's about 2.5. So that's the kind of stuff that is an issue. Is this, and it's the same. Yeah, it's that same 4.5. So, and let me check the back one, because the front and the back's the same bearing. So that's 4, and then let's check it sideways. Yep, and that's almost 4. So what we're going to end up having to do to make this work properly is we'll have to go back, and the center 3 is fine. So we'll have to go back and put undersized bearings on number 1 and number 5 to get the cam bearing clearance right. And if you seen the video that I done on how the oil system works on the LS, I will link it in the description. This right here is a problem. So the oil is, well, just go back and watch that video and it'll explain how the oil runs. But when you've got excessive cam bearing clearance, all the oil that should be going to the rotating assembly is puking out the rod, out to between the cam and the bearing, because 4.5 thousandths is just it's just insane, and we see that pretty regular. So we try to keep undersized bearings just for that problem because it's so common. And the housing bore, I mean, they all feel tight, but you could see, there was one that was, it was tight top to bottom and loose left to right. And that's just that housing bore is out. And there's really not a good solution because the bores are different sizes. So there's not really a good solution to fix it other than just trying to work it out with multiple sets of bearings. So we need to check some rods. I'll probably just show one rod on camera, but I'll get the bearings and set up some connecting rods, and we'll check the connecting rod clearance. So we got the bearing in the rod. We're gonna stick it in the vise here, just so we got something to torque off of. And these are 15 foot-pounds and then an 85-degree turn. All right, we'll go over here and set up the bore gauge. Yeah, so 90. So it's 10 under, so 2 and 100. 2 and 100 is standard, just like small block Chevrolet. And this one's 10 under. And it's on the, let me check a couple. It's on the low side. Yeah, it's 90 and about 2/10. So it's on the low side of 10. So we will get our bore gauge. So that's about one, yeah, it's 1.5. Yep. So we got 1.5 on the rods, which is again, it's nominal. Stock stuff 1.5 no problem. On race stuff, I usually try to run about 2 to 2.2, give or take. And sometimes we have to juggle around a set of halves, a set of ones. We might put a set of ones in, half a set of ones in, so we'd have a standard and a one in the same rod to, make the clearance be whatever we need to be. But stock stuff, even mild performance stuff, this is really what you want with mild oil, thin oil. It just, over time, that bearing's gonna wear, the crank's gonna wear, and you're gonna end up with more clearance. And the book says 8/10 to like 3 thousandths. I wouldn't never run 3, especially, new out of the box. I wouldn't never run 3. 3 would be the wear limit, but 8/10 I think's a little snug. But But this is pretty standard, you know, 1.5 on the rods and 2 on the mains. Again, we do this all the time, and they have great oil pressure, and they live forever. So let's go ahead and do the block plugs, all the block plugs. I'll show you that little kit, and we'll put all the block plugs in it and go over that. All right, so this is our block plug kit. It's on the website. I think it's like part number PMI-200, but it gives you all the plugs you need when you freshen a motor. We've got, come over here. So we've got oil here, we've got oil here, we've got water here, and then we've got water here. And then you've got the front gallery freeze plug, and then in the back here is where the barbell goes. So we'll start with the big water plug. And these come with sealant already on them. You don't need to do anything, but just make sure your threads are clean. And let me grab my ratchet. So these are 17 millimeter, this plug. All right, and then the smaller ones are 8 millimeter Allen sockets. And then what we do is we just put us a little bit of lube on the O-ring. Nothing crazy. And a lot of people, like, they stroke out about these things. You need a billet one and all this stuff. I mean, this works fine. There's no, I mean, so little oil is leaking by here. It's absolutely trivial. And the clearance is so good that any oil going by that's skipping the filter it's just not a big deal. So, I mean, if you want to spend 25 or 30 bucks on a billet one, you know, knock yourself out, but it's just not a big deal. Just a light tap with a great big hammer for no reason. I just had it laying there. So that's in, and then we'll do the front plug. And that's the front plug. And I don't know how many people that we do machine work for, we take all of these plugs out. All these plugs are removed when we wash the engine because you just can't get it clean any other way. So we take all the plugs out and we do all the machine work, and, you know, whatever the customer requests, that's what we do. If you say, you know, I want my cam bearings put in and, you know, we can build the motor, we'll do it ourselves. Great. And I don't know how many phone calls I get. Hey, I got my motor together and I ain't got no oil pressure. And it's mind-boggling that people leave these inside plugs out. The barbell and the front gallery plug, the little freeze plug. I don't know how many times I've got that phone call. And I just don't know how you miss that. If you build in the motor and you are a motor builder, how do you miss that? But it happens. I probably got 5 calls like that in the last 2 or 3 months, and it's just it makes me scratch my head. So don't forget the plugs, because if you do, you won't have no oil pressure. So that's a big deal. I think we're going to quit there. Like I said, we've got to change number 1 and number 5 cam bearing to get the clearance right. I'm pretty sure I've got some 2 unders on the shelf, so we'll swap them, and then when we come back, we'll be ready to, we'll have it hung on a stand, and we'll be ready to put the rotating assembly in. We'll go over putting the pistons on the rods, rings on the pistons, putting the crank in. We'll show you how to set the thrust, all of that stuff in the next episode. Thank you again for watching. I hope this stuff helps. Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Check out the website. We'll see you on the next episode.